Welcome back to the Sentinel Report. Thanks for staying with us over the break, folks. If you watch this program regularly, if you listen to us regularly, you know that the climate issue is one of the issues that I feel is most important, even though you don't hear about it much from the media anymore. It is the pretext being used to dismantle our energy infrastructure, ship our jobs overseas, empower the United Nations, put more taxes on us. I mean, it underpins so much of what's going on. And I'll tell you what, I've been watching the Trump administration very closely. And on the climate issue, they are doing absolutely incredible things. Most recently, the EPA, under the leadership of Lee Zeldin, is now trying to undo the disastrous so-called endangerment finding, where the Barack Obama administration claimed that CO2, the gas you exhale, carbon dioxide, is somehow toxic pollution that needs to be regulated by the EPA. Joining us now to discuss is one of the architects of these policies. She served as chief of staff at the EPA during Trump's first term. Trump just had some wonderful words to share about her. You can see what he posted on his social media place, Truth Social. He said, Mandy Gunasekara, it was fantastic. Talking about the environment scam on Barney and Company. Wow, she really gets it, including the biggest hoax of them all, windmills. We won't be approving any of those money-losing monstrosities in the Trump administration. Great job, Mandy. Joining us now to discuss all this and more is Mandy Gunasekara. And she is still active, still fighting this. She's got a book out called Y'all Fired that we're going to talk about as well. Mandy, welcome back to the program. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, good to be with you, Alex.
So walk us through what is going on in the administration when it comes to what Trump calls the environment scam, the climate scam.
There's a ton going on across the board. I mean, really, this all started one of his day one executive orders, unleashing American energy, where he really directed each of the agencies, Department of Energy, Interior, and then the US EPA, to really take a hard look at some of these policies that make up the Green New scam. And basically, policies premised on manipulated or distorted science used to justify regulations that have very little, if any, environmental benefit, but come with a host of costs on the economy that go all the way down to the consumer's pocketbooks. At EPA specifically, Administrator Lee Zeldin in March, he announced a day of deregulation, 31 different actions. A lot of these were tied to or derivatives of the Green New scam, just rolling those back or fixing them so that they are aligned in reality and the costs go down significantly. But the most important thing that he's done is what you just alluded to, the proposed rescission of the endangerment finding, aka the legally activating document to the regulatory Green New scam that has really cost the US economy so much in terms of direct costs and increased liability that has suppressed development and really, at the end of the day, shut down investment and jobs from Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, rural places like Mississippi, and they've populated overseas in places like China. And so President Trump, Administrator Zeldin, and the other secretaries at key agencies have really been busy cutting red tape, fixing some of these really horrendous documents that have justified unjustifiable regulations. And they've also been exposing a lot of the money laundering, taxpayer money laundering that has been awarded via the grants process, EPA being one of the worst under the rubric of environmental justice, where you had $20 billion set aside to go towards political nonprofits instead of doing anything remotely related to EPA's mission of protecting public health and the environment.
Yeah, amen. It's a scam piled on top of a scam, as far as I'm concerned. Mandy, I was at the climate conference 2 years ago on the Arabian Peninsula, and I asked Senator Chris Coons about, Trump was probably about to be reelected. I asked him about that. I showed him the polling data showing that most Americans don't even believe that global warming is caused by humans, that less than 1/3 were willing to pay a single extra dollar on their energy bill to save the climate. And his response to me, I said, how are you guys making all these promises here when Trump's about to be back in the White House? And his response was really telling. He said, well, under the Inflation Reduction Act, we're sending billions of dollars to Republican congressional districts to build climate infrastructure and solar plants and all that kind of stuff. The implication was we're buying constituencies in these territories for these Republican congressmen. What do we make of Congress's reluctance to really kind of go along with the president's agenda fully when it comes to this climate issue and the environment issue? I mean, they got some of it into the big beautiful bill, but a lot wasn't in there. What do we make of what's going on in Congress?
Yeah, I think it's reflective of We need more bold leaders in Congress to do the right thing, even if it's going to cost them in terms of their election coffers. And we don't always have that, even on the Republican side. We have a lot of great leaders, a lot of good voices. Senator Ted Cruz has been very strong on this, as well as a couple of other members that are willing to speak the truth. But it takes someone like President Trump coming in and pointing out the obvious, that how should it be okay for any member of Congress to accept being quote unquote bought off by integrating second rate technologies into their stakeholders and their constituents' electricity grid that makes the price of electricity go up and the reliability go down. It's absolutely absurd on its face, but also exposes how DC works. I mean, the gross thing about DC is even well intentioned people will ultimately get up there and they will be sucked into, buying into initiatives because it's good for them, either reelection or personal profit motives or investments, or all of these corrupting influences that really get in the way of policymakers making decisions based off of the facts, the latest and greatest scientific understanding, and what can work from a technical perspective, which is so important when you're talking about energy and environment policy.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, I mean, that's really the heart of my concern here. Trump did some great things. You were the architect of a lot of them during the first administration, and Joe Biden came in and literally day one, signing executive orders to reverse it all. Do you think these gains that are being made under President Trump will be sustainable over the long term? And what do we need to do to make that happen?
Yeah, I do, and I think the one big beautiful bill is an important first step because it shifts the direction, and that's the hardest thing to do.
Hmm.
So it's a really important step to cutting these subsidies that have incentivized the development of these massive wind farms or solar farms in areas where it just doesn't make sense. And there's also a lot of derivative consequences that the local communities have been speaking out against, but largely silenced. So I think the legislation continuing down this path is going to be really important. The other thing that we've had major wind in our sails, so to speak, is the Supreme Court. We have an originalist Supreme Court, thank goodness, and so they have gotten rid of Chevron deference, which was it was a useful tool for the left to push their climate policies, even when they didn't have the legal authority to do so. There's been a number of recent Supreme Court decisions that have really reined in unfettered actions by agencies unless they can point to specific provisions in the law, especially some of the regulations that have such a massive impact on the economy or even specific industries. So I think Congress really turning the tide alongside with President Trump's actions, as well as the Supreme Court. And then I'll tell you this, the other thing I'm excited about is, the legacy of the Department of Government Efficiency. It's obviously still going on, but they really blew the lid off the extent of the waste, fraud, and abuse in the federal government. And I think the public is much more tuned in and paying attention to this. And they're not going to let their elected leaders get away with not doing something about it. And so, all of those things together, with the fact that we have on the Republican side a strong, well informed bench that can carry a lot of these policy actions forward, I'm very optimistic about these policies, especially on the energy and environment front, having sustainability.
Amen. That is music to my ears, and I know a lot of our viewers and listeners will enjoy hearing that too. Mandy, obviously the COP30 is coming up. The UN Conference of the Parties is going to happen in Brazil, the biggest and greatest ever. The Trump administration obviously has taken a very different tack here. They have publicly repudiated a lot of this, withdrawn from Paris and many of the other agreements negotiated under the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. What are you expecting out of the COP30, and do you have any insights into to what extent the U.S. government is going to be participating in this, if at
I
all?
don't think they're going to be participating very much, if at all. That was my suggestion, and nothing ever really comes from it, other than a lot of bloviating, and a lot of commitments, if you will, of developed countries to ship millions to billions to trillions of dollars to the developing world. We may have talked about this the last time I was on, but Oxfam did an analysis of global climate change funding through the World Bank and found that $41 billion over the life that they looked, I think it was 2019 to 2021 or 2022, $41 billion just up and vanished.
Mm,
And so that's a major red flag. They can't even assess assess whether or not funds that are going from one place to the other are making any tangible difference because they can't even track the dollars. And so, all of those reasons collectively, with the reality you've been, these aren't serious conversations. It's a lot of activists that get together and talk about unrealistic things that don't really make sense, that are premised on the developed world sacrificing or bankrupting their economies just so the people at the UN can feel morally rich and better than the rest of us. The United States, I don't think they're going to have much, if at all, of a presence at the COP, and rightfully so. There's a better route to engage with people to reduce emissions and increase efficiencies in all sorts of industrial processes, including the extraction of energy resources. That's through serious conversations about technology sharing as well as expertise sharing, not having anything to do with these climate conferences. That, in my opinion, well informed opinion, is just a waste of time.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, the Department of Energy just recently released a new report that confirms so much of what you're saying. The new climate assessment, a critical review of impacts of greenhouse gas emissions on the U.S. climate. They found that CO2 induced warming supposedly hurting us a lot less than it was believed, or at least by some of the ideologues. A lot of interesting stuff in there. We're almost out of time, Mandy. You have an excellent book that talks on this and many, many other issues, kind of the big picture of how we get the basically the federalist system back. It's called "Y'all Fired: A Southern Belle's Guide to Restoring Federalism and Draining the Swamp." Why do we need to restore federalism? Why do we need to drain the swamp, and how do we do it?
Yeah, so it's what our country was founded on this idea that there is a constructive relationship between the states that actually hold the upper hand in terms of governing authority, with relationship to the federal entities. So states and federal government work together. The states have the upper hand because they're more tied to the people, and we want our constitutional republic to be reflective of the people in an informed way, which is how we do this via representative democracy. But nonetheless, the way to do it is what we're seeing playing out right now. It's restoring accountability in the bureaucracy. It's rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse. A lot of the policies that I suggested at the end of the book, the third piece of it, really have been embraced by the Department of Government Efficiency and the leaders at the various cabinets under President Trump. And so it's getting rid of superfluous offices that don't have much to do with the actually legally mandated mission of various agencies, ensuring that they're providing legitimate services and rooting out not just waste, fraud, and abuse, but political manipulation that tends to be to the detriment of the broader citizenry.
Amen. Mandy, excellent words of wisdom. The book, folks, is "Y'all Fired: A Southern Belle's Guide to Restoring Federalism and Draining the Swamp." Mandy Gunasekara, thank you very much for joining us today. Really appreciate it. We hope to get you back as these issues develop. And thank you once again for coming on today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. All right, folks. Again, get a copy of the book. It's called "Y'all Fired: Southern Belle's Guide to Restoring Federalism and Draining the Swamp." You can get it wherever good books are sold. Now, stay with us. We're going to be right back with much more here on the Sentinel Report.